I'm coming up on my 1 year of doing this podcast, and there are 5 major things that have changed in healthcare. And these aren't little things, these are huge things. These are things like hormones, important critical decisions about children and their healthcare, the food pyramid, how it's changed, also stuff like chronic disease, and more importantly, how we look at weight loss with these new weight loss drugs on the market. And this isn't about healthcare change. This is actually about how these changes affect your health. Because no more, it's not about lifespan, it's about health span. Forget 40s and 50s. It's about how strong you'll be when you're 70, how sharp you'll be when you're 80, and it's about living independently as long as you possibly can. Healthcare, it's moving away from this one-size-fits-all fear-based model to more of a personalization, more towards prevention, and definitely better data. So let's talk about what shifted and what you can actually do about it. And our first topic is going to be hormones. For more than 20 years, estrogen and other hormone therapies were treated like they're villains. They've had breast cancer fears, dementia fears, heart disease fears, and any other type of thing that can be brought about to scare you not to be doing hormones. That's what it's all been about for the last 20 years. And finally, in the last year, the FDA has finally clarified and removed long-standing language on many hormone therapies about menopausal issues so that women now don't have to be scared, burdened by the language that kept them away from these hormones for so many years. And why is this so significant? We have scared a generation of women against using hormones when that should have never happened. And when they're used appropriately, they're now saying, and what we've always understood, is they can protect your bones, your brain, your cardiovascular system, your muscle, and keep you healthy longer as you age. And as a healthcare provider, what I even find worse is now you have a generation of healthcare providers that have stayed clear of hormones, don't understand them, can't prescribe them, and really don't understand how to provide them properly to women. So now you have women that have been without, and you have healthcare providers that don't know how to prescribe them. Critical conversations about hormones are starting to happen again. Those are like, when is the best time to take them? And I think the data definitely shows doing them within the first 10 years of menopause are critical for the most benefit. But I think more and more data is going to come out over the coming years that show really any time during menopause for hormone replacement is something that can be done and is safe and effective. And with so much misinformation out there, I still think it's so critical to understand that replacing the hormones exactly what the body made is the most important thing, but also proper monitoring, proper follow-up, and making sure that you are doing hormones properly, even though they're natural, so that you get all the benefits that you should get. Because remember, hormones aren't a one-size-fits-all, which was really what Big Pharma wants you to think. It's very important about the dose and the woman, where she's at in life, age, and so many other factors that have to be brought in. But once again, that Women's Health Initiative study has made things so difficult, and getting rid of this stigma is going to take time. And this whole change, as a pharmacist that's been doing hormone replacement with women for 20 years, has me so excited. Because when hormones are done right, I've seen women get their moods back, their sleep is better, clarity is better, they have stronger bones, better muscles, and more importantly, they feel like themselves again. Because remember, with stronger bones, stronger muscles, a better brain, better cardiovascular system, it's not about lifespan, it's about health span and living your strongest and best as you get older. So if someone told you years ago that hormones are dangerous, I think it's time to revisit that conversation with someone who is trained to individually help you optimize your hormone replacement. Now, when it comes to nuance and personalization, now let's talk about pediatric care and vaccinations. In 2025, the CDC adjusted aspects of the immunization schedule and expanded shared clinical decision-making. And this is so very important. This isn't anti-vaccine. This is pro-conversation, because all kids are not identical. They have different immune systems and they develop differently. They have different genetics. They have different gut microbiomes. Their inflammation is different levels, and more importantly, their environmental factors are all different. And guess what? All of those affect the immune system. So trying to create one schedule for every kid is just not something that's best for an overall health of a child. In my recent conversation with pediatrician Dr. Paula Krubstad, we talked about what's called immune readiness. and how every kid's not the same because the gut microbiome can have an impact on the immune system. Genetics can affect how well a child responds to a vaccine. And then lastly, the important part is what about the environmental factors that a kid is in or that a child is in that can affect how well they respond to a vaccination? Not all children respond identically to immune stimulation. And this shift we're seeing in medicine, acknowledging that one timeline doesn't fit every child, is so important. And here's the part you have to remember. What happens to a child affects them as an adult. And early immune health influences autoimmune risk, inflammatory tone, and even chronic diseases later in life. So instead of asking yes or no, maybe it should be you should ask better questions. Is my child's immune system ready for this particular vaccination? Is their gut healthy? Have they recently been sick? Are there any other issues that would cause me to need a different timeline for vaccinations if those are needed? So hormones are becoming more personalized. Pediatric care is becoming more nuanced. Well, guess what? Nutrition is changing too. For decades, grains were the base of that food pyramid. Fat was demonized and protein was just thought to be something moderately that you needed. But the new dietary emphasis has totally changed. Now it's all about protein, eating healthy whole foods, better fats, and a major reduction in those ultra-processed foods that are loaded full of sugar and chemicals that only harm the body. And really, it's about putting those right things back in the body the way we were supposed to a long time ago. For years, functional medicine has always emphasized protein first and a whole foods diet. And finally, the food pyramid is getting shifted to allow this to be possible and echo that sentiment. And what's sad is how long this has taken. We've known for years that muscle mass is a key to longevity, metabolic health, and keeping you strong and healthy as you age. Protein is so important to build that muscle, but it also keeps you full longer. So I don't quite understand why it's taken so long. Those ultra-processed foods, we've known for years, they drive inflammation and really just make us more sick. And more importantly, getting rid of those excess sugars to keep our blood sugars nice and stable is so critical to our overall health. And when you keep your blood sugar stable, that typically means your insulin is going to be under control. And when that happens, it actually leads to better cognitive health, better cardiovascular health, and totally reduces our risk of long-term disease by keeping those insulin levels low and maintained steady. So remember, build that plate around protein. Make sure you get plenty of fiber from those good fruits and vegetables, plenty of good fat. Get rid of those things that come in packages. And in the long run, you're going to be a lot healthier because of it. And since we're talking about food, we've got to jump into the biggest metabolic question of the year, which is GLP-1 medications. GLP-1 medications, they have exploded in popularity. Those things like Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, they're everywhere. I get asked everyday questions about these medications because they have changed the way people look at weight loss. But I can tell you, it was never a possibility, and it's just not, I think, what the plan has been in terms of weight loss is to take a pill and have a solution. Yes, they reduce appetite. They have better glycemic control. Yes, you lose weight and they work. But here's what I'm seeing in real life. And I can tell you in this past year, the importance of understanding how these drugs work so they don't set you up for failure and you can actually ultimately have better success. People don't want to be dependent on a medication forever. They want control. And yes, when people start these medications, they lose weight. And yes, that's a positive. But when their body composition starts to change, and more importantly, if you just take a drug and don't have a plan, the muscle loss that we are seeing with these medications has been rather staggering. And more importantly, if you lose all this weight and don't have a plan for the end, if you ever get off these medications, your weight loss struggles are only going to get worse after coming off these meds. And now that people are starting to realizing this, I am beginning to see a resurgence in our regular weight loss classes at our pharmacy, where people are using in-body scans to actually track muscle loss and muscle gain while being on these medications or actually just not taking the medications at all. But more importantly, tracking things like visceral fat, which drives inflammation. Wearing CGMs to look at blood sugar control, because this is huge for weight loss. Because if you can keep your blood sugar stable by getting better sleep, controlling the diet, matching your glycemic index or your glycemic carbs with your activity, you can actually achieve weight loss that's sustainable, long-term, and don't have the risk of being stuck on a drug the rest of your life. So if you use an in-body scale to monitor your eating to make sure you're putting on muscle and losing fat, and wearing a CGM to track your blood sugar control in terms of what you eat, what your exercise does to blood sugars, how stress and sleep affects blood sugars, we are seeing people actually not only having not to take GLP-1 type medications, but actually deprescribing and getting them off things like blood pressure medications, blood sugar medications, and even things for cholesterol, because you're able to do with lifestyle what these medications do that can actually have long-term effects. So if you're going to be on a GLP-1, you have to have data. And honestly, if you're just chasing a number on a scale, you're going to struggle. You truly need that body composition following to make sure that you're getting and keeping your muscle, that you're losing fat, and more importantly, wearing a CGM to control those blood sugars, because if you don't make changes while you're on a GLP-1 medication, your chances of success after you're off are going to be very minimal. And finally, this leads to the fifth change that I've seen over the past year, and this is all about chronic disease reversal and health span. For decades, it's just that chronic disease is inevitable. I've got bad genes. Yes, I'm ultimately going to end up with diabetes. Or yes, it's natural to have cognitive decline as you get older. But you know what? That's garbage. We are learning there are so many things that you can do and track to set yourself up for success. So if that's your old mindset, you better start thinking about a new one. So before you start planning on having chronic disease forever or taking meds the rest of your life, why don't you talk about maybe trying to reverse it, like doing things and monitoring stuff like insulin resistance, monitoring fasting insulin, things like monitoring HSCRP, which is a marker of inflammation, ApoB, which is actually apolipoB, which is actually a better marker for cholesterol than even doing a cholesterol panel, things like monitoring homocysteine, vitamin D levels, and looking at gut health testing to actually monitor these drivers that are ultimately going to make long-term chronic disease happen and be proactive to prevent it in the beginning. As a pharmacist working with patients, what I do see is that we got better data. People are doing more wearables. People are doing more AI searches. And we're seeing little tweaks happening earlier and earlier in patients that are actually the red lights to say, if you attack this now, you can prevent disease later. These are things like mental health issues in terms of relation to inflammation. These are also things like preventing cardiovascular disease earlier so you don't have that heart attack later. Monitoring things like sleep and stress to reduce neuroinflammation so that you can cut that dementia risk. And even monitoring certain vitamins, minerals, and gut health to prevent autoimmune conditions. This is all possible now. And if you're not looking at these things, then you're really not looking at what you should be. Remember, you're not doomed by your genetics. Your genetics is like a light switch. It's up to you if you want to use diet and lifestyle to flip the switch on or flip the switch off, but you totally control that. And the way I see it, it's not about trying to live to be 110, 120 years old. It's about being strong, sharp, and independent when you're 75 and 80. And you don't have to wait for a diagnosis. You don't have to wait to be sick. Monitor trends, monitor markers, and keep yourself healthy and strong as you get older. If you step back and look at these 5 themes, there's one thing that's very clear, and that is healthcare is all about personalization. As a pharmacist, that's what I've seen happen in the last year, is that healthcare is about N of one medicine. It isn't about trying to come up with one drug to solve one major disease, because we are all so unique. There are so many things about each of us that make us that one person that we need that personalized approach. And the cool thing is that medicine and science is getting there to help us be that personalized one-on-one to help you figure out what you need to achieve your best health. But a couple general things through all these is make sure you keep your muscle healthy as you age. Always make sure you're moving, staying active, building muscle, because that is critical to overall health. Finally, a couple other things is track important key measures like inflammation markers, HSCRP, your fasting insulin, because these are drivers of inflammation. And if you can keep these low, you're going to keep better health as you get older. And lastly, keep asking better questions. That's the one thing that I enjoy so much interacting with my patients at the pharmacy and online is you have so many great questions and you're out there searching for the answers to set yourself up for better health. Remember, it's not about lifespan, it's about health span. And it's not about hijacking your health to make you live forever. No, it's more about carrying your grandkids without pain. It's about being able to be on the floor and get up on your own and move without everything creaking and hurting when you get up. It's about remembering the names of your friends and family as you get older, because these things aren't naturally supposed to happen a part of aging. We've just accepted them, but it's time to start making changes to make those not the norm, but a rarity. So in this past year, healthcare has shifted tremendously, but there is only one real question. Have you shifted with it? So if this episode gave you some clarity in a world that's full of noise and just total healthcare chaos, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, because informed patients don't just improve their own health, they actually improve the entire system. And as always, keep seeking the truth about how the body works.